me speak before? One, all right, great. So there's a couple of parts to this talk that I'd like to talk about. Is first maybe give a little bit of my story. Russ told you a little bit about it and how I had a life-threatening illness. The second part is to basically teach people to determine if something is raw and or healthy or not. There's a lot of foods in the raw food movement that may not be so healthy for us that are sold as raw, and we have this kind of automatic connection. If we see the word raw, we think it's automatically healthy, but that's not always the case. And so I have an interesting story to go along with it. I'm really pragmatic and only usually do things when there's some kind of need, and there's definitely a need when this arose for me to come up with a talk and teach people about this. And I mean, I'll research things and find out if something's really raw or healthy or not, but I don't expect everybody in here to do that, so I came up with a really easy system so that anybody can determine if something's raw and or healthy or not by what I'm going to teach you tonight. The last part that I'll be speaking about tonight is growing your greens, or my journey from taking my front lawn to basically just wiping out my front lawn and putting in all raised bed, edible vegetable gardens. So I think, that's, I've been into raw foods for 15 years, and I've been progressing all this time, trying to improve my diet, improve. I go by the Japanese kind of, or actually it came from America, from Deming, kanai, or constant and never-ending improvement. So I always try to improve what I'm doing in my life, and I improved my diet in raw foods so much that I couldn't really improve it anymore without actually improving the quality of the food I ate. And to do that, I pretty much figured out that in order to get the highest quality food, I needed to do it myself, because, there's some great organic farmers out there, especially the farmers markets, don't get me wrong, and we should support them, but I think, no better place than to grow it in your front yard, and when you're ready to eat it for dinner, go out there and pick it and eat it within 2 or 3 minutes, because there's very minimal nutrient loss, and, you're probably going to care and put a lot more love and attention into those plants than, big farmers that are, hopefully doing it for, more than just money, but, most of the time it's just for money, or big agri-corporations that are selling organic food to us that are just big corporations, and they are in it just for the money and not necessarily for your health. So I want to get by a show of hands to see how much time I want to dedicate to each kind of segment. So please vote for one of these. Either, should I focus a lot of the time on my story? So show of hands, only vote for one. Okay, so I'll minimize that. Or focus on, teaching you about the raw foods and what raw foods are healthy. How many people are primarily interested in that? Okay, and how many people are primarily interested in growing your greens and how to grow greens in your garden? All right. All right, so I see I'll focus a little bit of time on my story, more time on the raw food stuff, and then, a little bit of time at the end for about, growing your own food. How's that? So that's pretty much what I came up with. Can you drink a little bit of water here? So basically, starting off with my story, as Russ had mentioned in the introduction, I got spinal meningitis, which is basically a viral infection after I graduated college. I just remember playing broom ball with the guys one night. I was a chapter advisor at my fraternity at the time, and I came home from broom ball that night and just got really sick, like flu-like symptoms. So I thought it was some flu, and like any normal American, I went out and got some Theraflu and took that and figured I'd feel better the next day, but I didn't feel better, and even to this date, if I smell Theraflu, I'll probably just throw up, because that stuff's nasty, and I was throwing up, and actually not because of the flu, but because I actually had meningitis. So long story short, I was taken to the hospital, I passed out, was admitted into the hospital, I woke up, I don't know how much later it was, because I just remember waking up in intensive care, and I'm just like hooked up to the IV and all this stuff, and I'm like, what's going on? And the doctor told me, hey, you have spinal meningitis. I said, well, hey, when am I going to get out of here? She's like, well, you might not make it out of here. And that's not a fun thing to hear, at any age, but necessarily, a young guy who just graduated college in his 20s, who had his whole life ahead of him, who had never made the $1 million and all the American dream things, and, had a family or nothing yet. And I was like, oh my God, this is terribly wrong. And, looking back on that now, it's definitely probably the best thing that's happening in my life, because it spurred this totally different path in my life that I've taken and chose to take. And because I am alive today, I had to figure out how to rebuild my immune system so that it wouldn't happen again, because I did get better. And when I was leaving the hospital, the doctors told me that the reason why I got sick was that I had what's called a complement immune deficiency. And to put that in layman's terms, there's no doctors in here, it's basically a chronically weak immune system. And he blamed that on my genes, on defective genes. But as you know, if you've read like Dr. Ornish's information that, dietary influences can play a role in changing your genes, actually. So I think that, when the doctors don't know something, I think they just blame it on your genes because they, don't know, and that's what they can just blame it on. So I knew I needed to do something to build my immune system because he said you won't get a reoccurrence. It's gone. This bout is gone and out of you. But the problem is, people carry around the cold, the flu, or meningitis, and most people don't get affected. So, in your family, your wife or your kids have the flu or a cold, and you don't get sick. That's because your immune system's strong enough to fight it off. And he said people actually carry around meningitis, and people don't get sick with that because their immune systems fight it off. But mine wasn't that strong, and that's why I was affected. And none of the other guys actually had the room ball that the previous, a few evenings ago or whatever when I got sick actually. So just one of the unlucky ones. But that was really no surprise too much because as a child I was born with asthma, allergies, and eczema and ichthyosis. So those are all immune-related syndromes. So even as a child I had a lot of health challenges. I couldn't run with all the other kids in PE. I'd start to wheeze and have to stop, and I'd have to take theophylline for my asthma, and they'd give me hydrocortisone creams for my skin, and nothing really ever worked.
From eating dairy products. I was going to mention that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was allergic to many things.
Actually, I went to talk about vegetarians. I don't want to interrupt that, but
I just want to say real quick, if we could hold all the questions to the end, so if you could just take notes, if you do have any questions, I'd be glad to address all the questions at the end.
I'm not questioning, I was pointing that out.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so nonetheless, so I was sick as a child. I got better, but then after I got out of the hospital, after I almost lost my life, I knew I needed to do something different and change my lifestyle. I mean, I thought I did pretty well at the time. I didn't drink alcohol. I'd stopped eating red meat. I was a fairly good vegetarian who ate chicken and fish and read my ingredient labels, but it still wasn't good enough, and I still was afflicted and got sick. So I guess life went on, but I knew in the back of my head that I needed to do something. The other thing that happened when I was actually in the hospital and doctors told me that I might not make it out alive was that I had a value shift. Because I thought about, even if I had that $1 million and I could write a check to Mr. Doctor, $1 million, do not cash unless I walk out of here, money would basically do me no good. That wouldn't guarantee that I'd walk out of there. The only thing that could guarantee I'd walk out of there at that point actually was higher powers. So, I think I made a commitment to live in greater service, and that's one of the reasons why I do all the videos and all the education I do, and that's all unpaid. I don't, get paid for any of this stuff that I do. I just do it because I want to share what I've learned, because I'm grateful to be alive today, and I think that's another thing that's really important that we miss in our society is that, to be grateful every day, to live in gratitude about just one thing, pick something out that you're grateful for today. So, and the other thing was my values had shifted. So instead of desiring all this money, we're meant to, or we're almost taught in our society, I really started valuing my health. And my health was my most important wealth. And I mean, that's a common saying, but most people just say it, and that's just it's just a saying. They don't really take it to heart. And so I really started taking it to heart at that point in my life, and really wanted to just do anything I could to build up my health so I wouldn't be put back in that situation again where I'm in the hospital. My doctor's telling me that you might not make it out alive because it wasn't any fun to be there, and I don't want to be in that situation again, and it's definitely preventable in my opinion in many situations. So let's see. So the next part was I basically learned after I got out of the hospital, I had a value shift. I knew I needed to do something and build my immune system. I had no idea what. I learned about juicing through an infomercial from Jay Cordage, the Juice Man. And in one of his infomercials, he says that, if you juice, you can build your immune system. So that's all I needed to hear. I got on the phone, ordered the juicer. They shipped it to me, and I started juicing, and I felt better. I was doing that for about 6 months. And then I was at a health food store buying my organic produce to juice. And I found a book on the bottom shelf that's called Cleanse and Purify Thyself by Dr. Richard Anderson. So it talked about colon cleansing and cleaning out your colon, and death begins in the colon and all this other stuff. And it said you could build your immune system by doing this. And I mean, I think at that point in my life, I just needed to know things that would build my immune system. I would pretty much just try it to see if it worked. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that everybody may have tried or may not have tried, and some things work and some things don't. and I'm really all about trying new things. I mean, in gardening, I try to grow certain things, and some things work, some things don't work, and I keep growing the things that work, and give up the things that don't work, and I'm not stuck on them unless it's one of my favorite plants or something I really want to grow. Then I'll stick to it and figure out how to do that. So I took this cleanse, and it was basically a 2-week cleanse. You had to take this psyllium and bentonite herbs and chlorophyll like every 1.5 hours. And so it was a pretty intensive cleanse. And the first time I took the cleanse, I missed in the book where it said during this cleanse you could drink as much fresh juices as you want. And so that was probably a good thing because I just drank as much fresh water as I wanted. So when you're drinking fresh water and all the herbs and not the juices, then guess what? The herbs and stuff are more concentrated, so they're going to work more effectively. Because I later redid the cleanse, trying to do it with as much juice as I wanted, and it didn't have the same results. And some of the results that happened to me, of course, funny, stringy things came out of one end of me that I was playing with chopsticks. That was really interesting. But the other thing was I was doing a lot of emotional detox. So memories of, when I was a kid just came up, and I guess I was able to release them that I had never thought about. But the other thing that was really important, too, that even the doctors couldn't do, my pediatrician when I was a child, as I did mention, I had a dry skin condition, ichthyosis and eczema. And the doctors could never give me anything over the counter or under the counter or whatever to heal my skin. They would always be, eczema and itch, and they'd give me hydrocortisone, maybe it stopped the itching, but it really wouldn't make a difference. And as a child, it's really tough to be the kid that's different, to have dry skin, because I got teased a lot as a child. And the pediatrician told me when I was a child, he said, okay, John, when you're 13, you're going to grow out of your skin condition because your hormones will kick in and changes will happen in your body. And he told me this when I was about 10. And so every year on my birthday, I'd wake up, okay, 11, okay, my skin did change. 12, my skin did change. 13th birthday must have been one of the happiest days of my life. I woke up and guess what? Nothing changed. So I was really dismayed at that whole thing. But so anyways, back to this cleanse. So I took this cleanse, and I never paid really attention to my skin. But one day after the cleanse, I was pretty much done with the cleanse. I just was taking a shower and noticed my skin on my whole body, and it was just like a normal person's. It was gone, free of all the dry skin that I ever had. And I started crying in the shower because it just meant so much to me. Like, wow, this is something the doctors could never do. And if it's this good for my skin, maybe it's just this good for me. And in the book, it basically says that, if you're going to go on this cleanse, there's no reason in going back to eating the diet that you did to basically toxify or get toxic in the first place. You should eat raw foods. And that was the second time, actually the third technically time I've heard it. The second time was in the juice man when he sends the juicer. He gave you 6 cassettes. And on the first cassette, actually, it said, the thing that prematurely ages you faster than anything else is cooked foods. Don't put cooked foods in your body. And when I heard that originally, I could stop on the cassette player. I'm like, man, this guy's a freaking wacko. I don't know what he's talking about. Everybody I know eats, cooked foods. This guy can't be right. I mean, but, then I flipped the table over and hit play, and he said, okay, so for your skin juice, celery, carrots, and parsley, and I was into the juicing recipes, but I wasn't ready for that raw message yet. But when it happened for the second time, when the book said it, and then he said it, and then actually, previous to that, I met a person in my local area who was eating raw foods, several Thanksgivings ago with an ex-girlfriend. We went to a Thanksgiving meal, and his family brought all this stuff to our regular Thanksgiving meal, and it was just all this stuff that wasn't cooked. And he just explained it to me, and I tried the stuff. I didn't really think it was that hot, and I kind of forgot about it, but I see that guy, his name's Samson, at my local farmer's market every now and then. I still thank him, for introducing me to raw foods. So yeah, from that point on, after I had the major, change in my skin, and then I knew I needed to build my immune system, I pretty much had made the commitment actually at that point in the shower that I need to do this for the rest of my life. And that was back in 1995 when, this wasn't even as popular as it is today. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. There's a couple Ann Wigmore books and Victoria's book and Gabriel's book. Wasn't really popular. I was really lucky. There was a living food support group in San Francisco, about an hour away from me, that I drive down to every month for support and to meet others that are into this, because it was really, extreme back then. I mean, still extreme today, but I've been living it for so long, it's like normal. And when I go out somewhere else and there's McDonald's or something, that's really like, whoa, that's really weird to me now. So that's my background and why I got into it. basically, to sum it up, I got into raw foods for my health. I almost lost my life, so my health is one of my most important values, and I need to get into it for my health. And unfortunately, not everybody will get into raw foods for their health or have a life-threatening illness where they're actually going to lose their life and get into raw foods. So in my opinion, most people, while they say they're into it for their health, they might not be as serious as I am into it, because I really try to look at all the different things in my life, not just the food aspect, but there's one thing that probably everybody in here does on a daily basis, that is sacrificing your health for one of your other values, which may be convenience, for example. Does anybody want to take a guess on what that convenience thing is that's sacrificing your health every single day, probably several times a day? Anybody have any guesses? It's all about value. So, so the one thing is cell phones. So, 25 years ago or even 20 years ago, there's no such thing as cell phones. In Europe, they've done studies that show cell phones, cause, tumors and things. And, there's a higher incidence of tumors now. But just like cigarettes in the 60s and 70s, the tobacco companies want to cover that up, that it caused cancer. Now there's warnings on every, packet of cigarettes. There will be warnings one day on every cell phone box. The companies know it now, but if everybody in here pays $40 to the cell phone company, and everybody in this city pays $40 to the cell phone company, that's big money, that's big corporations. They have a lot of, we're here in Sacramento, a lot of pull with politicians with money, and I won't get into that. But nonetheless, so we're putting our health above, below, convenience or using our cell phone, and we don't think it hurts us. I'm really sensitive to energies and foods, and if I get a cell phone used around me, I'll get a headache. If I eat non-organic food, my skin will break out in a rash because our skin is the largest eliminatory organ. So, yes, I'm hypersensitive. Is that a good thing? Sometimes it's not a good thing, but I think it's good that my body is trying to get rid of the stuff as fast as it's coming, and my body gives me a notice. So, if I get a headache, when we punch ourselves, ow, that hurts. Our body's giving us a signal. Hey, that's not good for you. You put your hand on a stove that's hot, you're going to burn yourself. There's a reason. So when your body gives you a warning signal, we need to listen to it, and most people aren't that sensitive. So getting back to the health and the raw foods, so some people may get into raw foods because they're a vegan and it's the next logical step. Some people may be an environmentalist. They want to use less heat to cook their food, so they use less natural gas or electricity, or because it's just getting back to nature, or they're a gourmet chef and they want to break into the raw foods chef market, because if you're there's lots of chefs out there, but to differentiate yourself you need to be something special, and if you're a raw chef, well, that's something new and exciting. So many different reasons why people are into raw foods, but not necessarily because you went through a life-threatening illness, as I have. So my view on a lot of different things that are happening in the raw foods movement is a little bit different than many other people's views. So we'll get into my talk. Just because it's raw doesn't mean it's healthy next. And the reason why I came up with this talk is because I was actually at a raw health retreat up in Malala, Oregon. It's called the Living in Raw Spirit Retreat, and it's a great retreat. If you go to one raw foods event this year, I'd say go to that one. It's really good. It's in a Living in Raw Spirit retreat in Malala, Oregon. It's really, you can do an internet search for that. But I went up there, and basically what it is they serve you 3 meals a day. It's all fully catered. They also, it's an all-inclusive thing. So they house you and they feed you, and you get all the classes all for one price. Really affordable. And so for dinner one night, I was at dinner, and they brought out, they fly in chefs from all over the country to make some of the dinners. There's I think 3 or 4 dinners. And these chefs were actually flew in from New York, and they own a restaurant out there. And I won't mention what restaurant, out of respect to them. But they had a restaurant out in New York. They flew in, they made the dinner that night, and they brought out the first course, which was some kind of carrot avocado soup or something like that. And so, I was eating it, and, it was all right. And then I ate the whole thing. Then after that, I got a headache. And I was like, this is really weird. And I was like, maybe I'm just dehydrated, or maybe, something's weird. I don't know. But I rarely ever get headaches. It's some of these things like headaches and stomach aches that I used to get a lot when I was conventional, and I don't even really think about it anymore. I just don't get headaches or stomach aches unless something's really wrong and my body's telling me, hey, something's wrong. So I didn't really think much of it because I'm really particularly sensitive. But then when somebody else at my table said, I just ate the soup and I don't feel well, then I I was getting more curious. And then when I saw somebody get up from another table and start to walk out like she maybe wasn't feeling good, I got up and, like, because I'm curious by nature, like, walked up to her and said, hey, what's going on? She's like, oh, I ate the soup and I don't feel good. I'm like, I'm either going to go to the bathroom or my room to relax. I'm like, whoa, this is a problem. We're at a raw food retreat, and they're supposed to be serving healthy raw foods, and now people aren't feeling good after they ate the soup. I put one and one together and got two, and figured, hey, there's something in that soup that's causing an ill effect on people. This is not cool. So I went in the kitchen and talked to the chef and said, hey, what's in the soup? So he goes and lists the ingredients, carrot juice, avocados, and, whatever else. And he said one thing, Bragg's liquid aminos. So many people in here are enlightened to Bragg's liquid aminos. If you've been into raw foods for a while, there was a big internet controversy about that many, many years ago, that it contains naturally occurring MSG or monosodium glutamate, and it causes, one of the exposures of monosodium glutamate causes headaches. And, but I guess evidently this chef wasn't into raw foods for his health, or he hadn't been into it that long, or whatever other reason, and that he was using that. And so then I said, well, hey, did you know that, Bragg's contains a naturally occurring MSG? And it causes symptoms such as headaches and is maybe not so good for us. So is it possible that you could use something else like Nama Shoyu that at least doesn't contain the MSG or, miso, or even use some Celtic sea salt instead? And he felt like really like I was attacking him. I mean, I'm coming from a place just trying to help him, because I kind of see that, chefs and people that make food and have recipe books play a big role in educating others, because we learn by modeling. So we saw our parents walk when we were little babies, and we tried to walk like they walk, and we learn by them. And if we see a raw food chef making things, we'll try to make recipes like they make, or follow the recipes in their book, or whatever. So I really want to try to get this out to chefs that, hey, at least educate them about what's good and what's not, so they can have a bigger impact on everybody else that they're teaching. And so he felt attacked.
Your camera just shut off.
Don't worry about it. So the thing that happened was he really wasn't feeling. He's like, okay, I'll look into it more. And that was pretty much that. And then I went back to my room that night. I'm like thinking to myself, man, this is a big wrong. This is not cool that this is happening. But all these people just don't know that Bragg's is not good, because they haven't been into it, into raw foods for as long as I have. And most people don't, frankly, do the research on every possible ingredient that they put into their body to determine if it's good or not. So I went back to my cabin that night and was up till like 3 in the morning trying to figure out ways to teach people how I could basically teach them without actually saying, Bragg is bad, this is bad, this is bad, and this is bad, because I don't want to stand up here and, just shout out what's bad and what's good, because, who am I to say that? I want to really empower people, because I think one of the things that's missing in our society these days is that, in school and in our education system, we're taught to follow the leader. And that's not always the best thing. I think we should really be taught to learn and really think for ourselves and use our creative problem solving and things for ourselves. So my challenge that night at 2 in the morning was to come up with a way that I could really make people think about these things, learn for themselves, because when you kind of have that light bulb moment in your head and it goes off, that's when you really learn something, not when I spout something out and you hear it and you write it down. And it's in out one ear and out the other. So I want all you guys to have a light bulb moment for this technique that I'm going to share with you to go off in your head and hopefully walk away from this talk with this plan that I came up with, or system, so that everybody in here could, learn this information and then, go out into the world and hopefully share it with others. And it's a really easy system. So it took me several hours just scribbling on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper in all different funny ways. And this is what I came up with. And the reason why I came up with it, I had given my 2 talks at that retreat that time, because I gave 2 talks. But then on the last day, they have an open mic session, basically. So during a period of time between 10 and 11, they have a 1 hour time for anybody that's attending the event. So say there's you're a dance teacher and you're you do wild food weed talks or whatever. Anybody at the event could give a talk on whatever subject they want and say, hey, meet in the multi-purpose room if you want to take, ballet dance lessons, or meet over here if you want to go on the wild food walk. So I figured I'd have a talk about teaching people. Just because it's raw doesn't mean it's healthy, because I was strongly impacted by the meal that night before. So that was my whole goal that night, and I think I succeeded. So what I came up with was what we're going to do today. Let me get some chalk out. And it's really simple. And so what we're going to do, before I get into that actually, so the other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into that is that there are no raw food labeling laws. So I'll repeat that. There are no raw food labeling laws. So something could be labeled raw and really not really raw. So by generally when you think raw, you think not heated above 118 degrees or whatever temperature you would like to fill in, because there's been debates about that too. So for example, almonds you usually buy at the bulk section in your health food store. The raw almonds have been pasteurized because it's a California state law that they have to pasteurize the almonds. Basically, it's to cover their ass so there's no E. coli outbreaks, but I won't get into that either. So any almonds you buy have been pasteurized, and so it's not too bad that they actually steam pasteurize them. It's really worse that they should actually chemically pasteurize them and then add chemicals to it, and then it's still just labeled raw almonds. But they've been heated and or chemically pasteurized, and they're not raw. I mean, another easy one is cashews. Most cashews are basically heated to too hot of a temperature than what we would like in the raw foods movement, but they're sold as raw cashews. I mean, people could label anything raw. They could label roasted almonds raw and sell them, and that'd be completely legal because there is no legal definition of words like raw or words like natural, but there is a legal definition, as we know, of organic. So there's no raw food labeling law. So one example, I have a couple here. Here's a sugar in the raw. So if you're into raw food, you're like, oh wow, this sugar's raw. I can eat it now. But I'm sorry to tell you that sugar is processed at temperatures hotter than 118 degrees. And even some of these raw food candy bars, which are really even an abomination in my opinion, it says organic live food fusion on here. Organic live food bars. So you think, wow, this is not only raw, but it's also live. And it's made by a company called Raw Indulgence. But if we read off the ingredients in order are cashews, which may or may not be raw, if they get the really raw cashews, which still, in my opinion, aren't too healthy for us. Agave nectar, which may or may not be raw. Dates, which may be raw, but cocoa powder. So cocoa powder is not cacao powder, it's the cocoa powder after they process the chocolate and basically roasted it. Processed with alkali, almond, at least it has sprouted flax seeds, and then at the bottom it says 91.7% raw, and I think that's probably a bit higher than I would give it, but nonetheless. And this is just many examples. I was at the Natural Products Expo in Anaheim in March, and there's a new company coming out with a new granola, and their granola, the second ingredient was maple syrup. And as we know, maple syrup is not raw, but they still call it raw because they didn't heat process the product after they made it. And it's really sad about the story about maple syrup is because Giuliano, he was one of the first people into raw foods and wrote one of the nicest recipe books way back then. He used maple syrup in his recipe book. So by de facto standard, if you just kind of follow the leader or follow the follower, Giuliano used maple syrup, so now you're a raw food chef and you saw he used it, so now you use it in your recipe book. Then it just goes down the line, and people continue to use maple syrup to this date, and I definitely agree that maple syrup may be healthier than some things like agave, but it's still not raw, and we shouldn't call it raw. So no raw food labeling laws, so we're going to determine how to determine if something is raw or not right now. So let's see, the first step is we're going to act collectively as a group, so this is audience participation, because it's not all about me. I want everybody to come up with this and have a say in what the list we're going to come up with, because it's us as a collective group. We're basically going to define what does raw foods mean to you, or some criteria for raw food. So let's write up here, what does raw food mean? Okay, so does anybody have a criteria of a raw food they like to put up on the board? Yes?
We were just talking live active enzymes, or?
Excellent one. So, live active enzymes. So, enzymatically active or potentially active for things like, hopefully really raw almonds that can't sprout, because I don't know if they have, active enzymes, but if you sprout it, then it will. So would everybody agree that we should put up, enzymatically active or potentially enzymatically active?
These are actually living and growing crowns.
Sure. Let me get this and then we'll get right back to you. So enzymatically active.
Yeah, enzymatic, yeah.
Okay, so does anybody have another one? Yes.
Just that food that's actually sold, sprouts are actually sold as living. You know, they're even still living.
Sure. So today we're defining raw, not necessarily living. We could do the same exact thing with living foods if we want to, but that would constrict us and make this a lot more challenging.
I thought you were supposed to raw food.
Yeah, sometimes the term is used interchangeably, but actually living and raw foods are definitely different in my opinion. Absolutely. So does anybody else have another criteria they would like to add up to our list? Yes.
They'll probably start rotting within 24 hours.
Excellent. So will rot within 24 hours, or instead of rotting within 24 hours, how about it says will spoil or will go bad?
Yeah.
To just make it a little bit more broader, because I'd probably be with you, but so would everybody agree that a raw food should rot or go bad at some point and not be able to sit on the shelf literally forever? Okay, perfect, great. I'd agree with that one. So let's see, what was that? Not go bad, or no, will go bad.
Not radiate, the last one.
Okay, will go bad or spoil.
How about uncut?
All right, cool. So we have uncooked. So instead of uncooked, let's make that a more specific. So how about not heated above 118 degrees or whatever temperature you want to put in. If you want to feel for yourself it's 105, or if you think it could be 120, I'll say 118. So should we put not heated above 118 degrees up on our list? All right, I think we got pretty much unanimous. Not heated. Not heated above 118 degrees. Great. Does anybody have any other criteria that they would like to add to our list tonight? Yes?
Found in nature?
Found in nature. That's an excellent one. So do you think a raw food should be naturally occurring? How about that one? Occurs naturally. Everybody agree with that one? All right, you guys are a good crowd. You guys are easy. Occurs in nature. All right. Yes, Russ.
How about not radiant?
Not irradiated.
Will that work?
Not irradiated. So let's see here. I would personally agree that we should put not irradiated, or maybe not. Not. We could put that up there. Yeah, would everybody?
Like a sub bullet though, like if the enzymes are active, it hasn't been, so not active.
That's true.
It's kind of like a sub bullet.
Yeah, that's
Those
true.
are repeatedly-
I've also the other thing that might come up is somebody might say, should we put must be organic up here? And I would have to kind of disagree with that because, say you live in the middle of Kansas or somewhere where they don't get a lot of organic and you can only get, non-organic conventional stuff. Can you no longer be raw? We could still eat, irradiated stuff. I wouldn't advise for it. Probably fast first, but I would probably accept that. Or how about not chemically treated instead of not organic, at least not chemically treated or something like that?
That's like you said, still wrong. You may not have killed it by
Right.
the best food, but it's still
I know, but so let's put it up to the group. What should we put up? How about let's vote on not irradiated? Should we put not irradiated up on our list?
Yeah, sure. No, because it goes into the will go bad.
Will go bad.
Or if it's irradiated, then the enzymes are killed, or potential enzymes.
Yeah.
They're not active, so that's already covered.
Okay,
Right?
we'll skip that one then. How about not chemically treated? Should we put that one up on the list?
Well, it would still be raw though.
Yeah, it could be. All right, so we won't put that on the list. Okay, so does anybody else have any other criteria they'd like to add to our list here? Yes.
Other animals other than humans probably eat it as a part of their natural diet.
Oh, that's one that I haven't had before, actually. So, other animals eat it. Yeah, I sound like Will Dawson on the, what is that?
Naturally in their environment, not
Right.
rats.
So should we put other animals or other earthlings, and earthlings being in the wide sense because a dog or even an ant is an earthling, Eat it
As a natural part of the diet. not
as a natural part of their diet. Let's vote on that. Raise your hand if you'd like to put that up there. We have 4. I think we'll skip that one. That's a good one, though. I like that one. Let's see. So how about I'll add one. So for me, a raw food should be health building and not taking away from your health. It should be good for us, right? So would everybody agree that a raw food should be health building and not taking away? All right, I think that we pretty much got that one. Health building. Okay, does anybody else have any other ones?
The only thing I would add to that is maybe that's health building in the long run. Some things appear to be health building in the short run, but over the long run of your life, are actually destructive.
Right. I mean, no, I'd agree with that. You could just put that in I guess, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Has to be fresh.
Fresh, excellent one. So, has to be fresh, or instead of saying fresh, what's another way to define freshness? For me, it would be, let's see, has high vibrancy. If it's vibrant, then it's fresh, and as it's not as fresh, the vibrancy goes down, like wilty lettuce. So would everybody agree that it should contain high vibrancy?
Yes.
All right, great. High vibrancy. Okay, anybody else have any other criteria they'd like to add to our list here?
You have to pay for more for it than regular.
What is that?
You have to pay more for it than other food.
You have to pay more for it. That's the first time I got that one. I don't know that I'd agree with that one, actually. You shouldn't have to pay more for it. Actually, you could walk outside and pick some weeds out of the ground. It's actually they're free. Yes.
Should we attribute a percentage? Like, for example, some kombuchas have tea that's been heated above 118 degrees but still labeled a raw food.
Let's see, how would I answer that? No, I would say there shouldn't be a percentage. This is just the definition of raw, what all raw means to you, basically. Yeah, so, I mean, you'll see how later this is going to work, and you could have, your own criteria. This is our group consensus criteria, and then later I'll show you how this all fits together. So let's see. So another one for me that's really important is has high water content. After all, we are 70 to 75% water, and if we're not eating things that are at least that high in water content, it's going to dehydrate us. So would everybody agree with has high water content?
Yes.
Okay, good. Has high water content. All right. Anybody else have any other criteria they'd like to add? Let's see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Come on. The last talk I gave in Florida about a week ago, they came up with 10.
Colorful.
Colorful. I like that one. Should a raw food be colorful? Vote of hands. Got about 50-50, I think. We'll save that one. But we'll make the cut. Yes?
It should be designed for our digestive system. So if it's like,
Ooh, that's a good
we don't
one.
have a gizzard for nuts. We don't.
Okay, so designed for our digestive system. Show of hands. We should have that up there. I think we got the majority on that one. Designed for, that's a good one. Designed. Or we could put, should we put instead like easily digestible instead?
Huh?
Should we put easily digestible? Because I mean, that's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Sure, okay.
So that means no cabbage. Does that mean no cabbage?
Well, we'll see how that works.
Ferment.
Probably goes in the same category, but shouldn't make us sick in the short term or long term.
Shouldn't make us sick.
Pain or sick.
Yeah, I mean, the converse of that would be kind of health
Yeah,
building.
it's the opposite of health building.
Yeah. Let's see, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, 8. Okay, how about one more? I'd like you guys to beat Florida, you know,
I'm
but
trying to think because I tried to explain to my parents again that canola oil is not food. I mean, it's actually not a plant things butter is food. So I mean, it's.
oh, that's a
I mean,
good one.
I said, everybody's like, I can't. I said, how much monthly you're sick? You're sick, and you're still using canola oil. Use good old we're an olive growing state. We've been for 500 years. You know, it's like use olive oil. You can buy olive
Great.
oil. That's
So you make a great point. So how about minimally processed? So we, raw food shouldn't be just some like powder or some kind of liquid or something that's, like corn syrup far removed from corn or something like that. Would be the extreme example. Because we want to eat natural, unprocessed foods that occur in nature. So. Foods that have minimal processing or minimally processed foods, should that make our list? Or a better way to define
I was
that?
going to say, kind of in that same vein, but concentrated, right? Is that kind of what you're doing with processing? It's
Right.
Still may be naturally occurring, but concentrated.
Processing it.
Like even like, sugar where they evaporate cane juice,
Right.
They still have
So minimally processed is what usually makes the list.
okay.
So should we put on our list minimally processed or like non-processed or minimally processed? Okay, great. Okay, one more. At least tie Florida for me. I gave a talk in West Palm Beach, Florida. They had 10. Let's see.
Pure water
Pure water.
used to grow the food.
Pure water used to grow the food.
Like not chlorinated or toxic water.
How'd that relate to this? I mean, that we could, I guess the thing is, contains no chemicals. Kind of voted on that one. Chemical free. I mean, I personally agree with that, but I don't know how we qualify that and put it in our list to make it fit.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can come up with another one real quick.
I think this might be one. It would contain no complete proteins because it could just be amino acids. I don't think it's anything in the environment naturally that would be considered raw that we won't have.
Or how about this? How about like not from an animal? Because we are hopefully talking about vegan raw foods today. So that'd be an easy one. I think they had that one out in Florida. So how about not from it? Because animals, proteins are complete. So would everybody agree that it should not be from an animal?
There are raw animal products.
Well, a bee could be considered an animal. It depends on your definition of bees. I mean, I eat honey rarely. I think it could be a good thing. But, this is, you'll see how this list works out. So can we get an overwhelming majority that should not be from an animal? I think we got it. All right. Not from an animal. Great. Awesome. So glad I could get rid of that chalk. All right, so you see we basically came up with our list here. We have 10 criteria now. So now what we're going to do with this list is put up foods to this list. So let's see, the easiest thing to do today is on my drive over here, I picked lettuce right before I got into my car to drive up to Sacramento today, and I was eating a head of lettuce picked from my garden. So I don't know, it was like a red lettuce, and I forget exactly the kind, but is the red lettuce that I picked from my garden that, I picked probably about 11 a.m., and, well, I didn't eat it until about 3, is that enzymatically active?
Yeah.
Is it, will it go bad or spoil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it not heated above 118 degrees?
Right.
Is it occur in nature? Is it health building? Does it have high vibrancy? Does it have a high water content? Is it easily digestible? Is it non or minimally processed? And is it not from an animal? Perfect. So you can see my lettuce that I grew and ate this afternoon easily passed all these with flying colors. So let's somebody shout out or raise your hand. Another raw food that's considered a raw food today that they would like to put up to our criteria here. Yes.
Agave nectar, I'm hearing a lot about.
Sure. Okay. So agave nectar. Let's put agave nectar up to the list that we just came up with. So is agave nectar enzymatically active? I mean, basically based on my research, and I do have a couple handouts here. That's a good thing. I did research actually on specifically agave, and on the back of this is cacao. And so this is my research on these two exact ingredients, sharing some of the information that I've learned. A lot of it was from PubMed, actually, online. And then I also have some other things up here you may want to pick up later. So anyways, is agave nectar enzymatically active? And what I would say to that is, most of the time I would say maybe on some of these if we truly don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know, and that's the answer could be yes, no, or maybe, or we don't know. I mean, that's the honest answer. On this, I would say enzymatically active for agave. I would probably say no, because if it was enzymatically active, it would continue to ferment. And what does agave ferment into? Tequila. Yeah. So I'd probably say it's probably not enzymatically active. Will agave go bad or spoil? I mean, I don't know, but probably not. I don't know. Not heated above 118 degrees. Once again, I mean, we don't know. Does it occur in nature? Agave plants occur in nature, but not, there's not like a trees with agave bottles or nectar hanging out. Is it health building? I would definitely resoundingly put my foot down and say no. Does it have a high vibrancy? I'd say no.
How do you define vibrancy? That's pretty big.
Vibrancy, what I mean by that is like, say we took like a Krillin photograph. For me, that's kind of what vibrancy is. I mean, for me personally, I mean, I could feel the vibe. It's kind of like an energy thing. I can't really define that, but just being into raw foods, I mean, you can see the wilty head of lettuce versus one at the farmer's market is just so much more lush and just like the energy, the vibrancy. So if you took a Krillin photograph, I don't know if you've seen those before, you can see the energy coming off of it. So, a higher vibrancy food would have more of an, I don't want to say aura because that's not the same thing, but just more energy.
Okay.
They define that like vibrancy could be also called like biophotons is what they call it in Germany, or prana, or chi, in some other languages. So I would say, no on the agave having a high vibrancy. Does it have a high water content? No, it's been dehydrated out and been concentrated. Is it easily digestible? Well, it gets kicked out to our liver to digest it, so I'd probably say no. Is it non or minimally processed? I'd say it's fairly heavily processed. Is it not from an animal? Yes, it's not from an animal. So as you can see from the raw agave nectar, we got, a lot of maybe, some we don't know, some no's, and maybe like, I don't know, how many yeses do we have? Like one? Yeah, so we had like one yes. So let's go ahead and do another one, yes.
What about white miso paste?
Oh, good, white miso paste. I do use some miso sometimes. So white miso paste, is it enzymatically active?
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's been cooked, but then they ferment it, and then it's alive. But I guess it depends on the brand. Hopefully they're not re-pasteurizing it afterwards, but yeah, I would agree that most probably are. Will it go bad or spoil? I've had it go bad on me. Not heated above 118 degrees. Well, it depends when. I mean, they have to cook the soybeans, and then they ferment it. So technically it has been heated at some point, but then they introduce culture to it, which then cultures it. So then after that point, is it heated? Probably not. Does miso paste occur in nature? No. Is it a health building?
Yeah.
Depends who you ask. I went down to Japantown one time in San Francisco, and this guy was handing this stuff out and how really bad soybeans are for you and how to avoid all soy products. I mean, I personally believe that, a little bit of soy that has to be fermented is, probably all right and probably is in limited amounts good for us. Does it have a high vibrancy? I don't know. No, I don't know. It has a high water content. No. Is it easily digestible?
Yes.
Yeah, it depends. Maybe. Depends on the person. Maybe. I don't know. Is it non or minimally processed?
No.
No. And is it not from an animal?
Yeah.
Yes. So on that one, you can see we got definitely more yeses than the agave, but not as many yeses as the, my lettuce that I grew and ate. So the whole point is, we could sit here all night and put more things up against this, but you're kind of getting the idea where I'm going. We want to eat things that have as many yeses as possible. So, all yeses would be optimal. More yeses than no's, and more yeses than I don't knows and maybes, of course, is what we should be doing. And does this happen in the raw foods movement today? They'll come out with a brand new raw foods product. We could put them up to this list: cacao, agave, Yacon syrup, Jerusalem artichoke syrup. Whatever it is, we could put it up to this list. And most packaged products, I'll tell you the secret, most packaged products are going to get, maybe one or two yeses, but mostly no's. And the things that are going to get the most yeses are fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. And we all inherently know that that is what raw foods is, but we get sidetracked by marketers because our whole lives are about, we are born and bred to be consumers and to buy products in the package. I was at the co-op here in Sacramento. You guys are lucky to have that good co-op here. And I was just seeing people fill up their water bottles, and some of them were actually filling their polycarbonate bottles, but actually they sold glass bottles there, which was really good. But we still want to buy stuff, and even if our water tap is really good, that we could just filter and take out the stuff, and that's what they're doing there. They're just filtering city water with whether reverse osmosis, UV, carbon or whatever. We still want to go to the store and buy that water instead of filter ourselves and make our own water. So we got to try to break out of that consumer mold, and that's why I've gotten really passionate about growing my own food to become more sustainable and independent of all that stuff. So the goal is to eat things with the most yeses as possible. And now you could go into any health food store, grocery store, any raw food event where they have booths and people are selling stuff, and take this criteria in there with you and put it up to the foods and see what happens. But that can get really cumbersome because it's a really long list, and unless you travel with an iPhone or something you could have that list on referred to, it's going to be too hard. So I like to make things really simple. So the easiest way to do this is what I would recommend is you go and pick out your top 3, and you could probably easily remember your top 3 criteria. So for me, I'll share with you my top 3 criteria. For me, my top 3 criteria are health building, because I almost lost my life. Number 2 is high water content, because after all, we are 70 to 75% water, and if we're not eating something that high water content, it's going to dehydrate us. And 3 for me is high vibrancy. For me, I really taste and feel a difference when I eat foods that are much more higher in energy or nutrition or however you want to qualify that. And also if it's high vibrancy, it also definitely is enzymatically active and probably hasn't been heated above 118 degrees. So I kind of sneak that in there. So those are my top 3. So I could go into any health food store with those top 3 criteria and ask myself, when I pick this up, I saw the chlorella tablets over there. I could pick up a chlorella tablets. Okay, is it water rich? No. Is it high vibrancy? I would mostly say no, but my last talk to me said yes. And I would say, is it health building? And I would definitely say yes. So, do I choose to eat chlorella tablets? Yes, I do. But you see, it has 2 no's and 1 yes. Well, that's because for me, the health building aspect definitely overrides the other things. And usually when I eat chlorella, I put in a smoothie that does have high water content. And I guess if I could, I'd probably eat a fresh chlorella out of just the algae skimming off the pond or something. If I knew I could get a good strain that wasn't contaminated with anything else. So we want to do the best we can. So wherever that is, but at least be aware and try to avoid things that have 3 resounding no's to your list. And if maybe there's 2 no's and 1 yes, think about it a little bit more and really think about if you really want to put that in your body and have that become you. So does anybody have any questions regarding this aspect of my talk? So the question is basically, she went to a restaurant and they served bread that was not heated above 150, but they still called it raw. So in my definition, what I've always gone through is basically 118 was the raw point. This is back to Dr. Edward Howe's book, Enzyme, I think Nutrition, I believe, the book, and he did a lot of research showing that 118 was the temperature, but it's about time and temperature. So if I pass my finger over a candle flame, I'm not going to get burnt, but that's pretty damn hot. But if I sit it on the candle flame, I'm going to get hurt. So my friend has done testing with things like sunflower seeds and put them in the dehydrator at 150 degrees for 2 hours, and then try to sprout them, and they still sprout. So it's time and temperature and the food. Each food is a little bit different. So I would generally say that bread that's been heated above at 100 up to 150, it's probably not raw. If it's heated, I would say it's probably not really a raw food product. And the other question is, the other thing that's all a personal choice is, do you want to eat 100% raw? And for me, the answer, I've eaten 99.999% raw since 1995. I've had a couple slip-ups or, times when I had a big emotional episode and I ate some cooked foods, but I noticed how it made me feel, and it took my energy from here all the way down to here, and I didn't like something being taken away from me. I mean, the morning after, I'd literally have to just lie in bed. I didn't feel like waking up, and I mean, that's how I used to feel many years ago when I ate a standard American diet. I mean, nowadays I wake up and I just jump out of bed. I'm just full force, 100%, ready for the day and ready to move. And I really didn't like that, and just some of the other digestive things that happened. And so, but everybody in here needs to make a decision and a choice. And for most people, unless you're healing an illness or something, I would say, there's no really reason to be 100% raw. The main benefit of raw foods is you want to eat the more fresh fruits and vegetables that'll, meet our criteria, the better. So, if you're 80, 90%, I think that's great. If there's an occasional time you want to go have that sandwich that's heated to 150, or you eat, minimally processed, foods that meet this criteria, or most of the criteria, I think that's going to be fine. But we want to really focus on eating a higher percentage of fresh fruits and vegetables in our diet, because I could call myself a raw foodist, and as I did in the beginning years, I ate, dates and almond butter, or dates and nuts. And dates and nuts can surely be raw, but definitely, something like steamed vegetables, fresh picked vegetables from the farmer's market, or even from Whole Foods or the co-op, it's definitely, I would say, healthier than eating dates and almond butter that are raw. So technically, it's no, but there is no legal definition of raw food, as I said, so they can eat it to whatever temperature they can say it's raw, and it's up to their definition, since there is no legal definition.
Is there a campaign for a legal definition at this point?
It's been one of my goals and on my project list, and I have many, to come up with some kind of raw certification. But then as I think about that more, it would be really, really hard to police literally every single company, or go out and inspect them. And then what definition is it? I mean, is it this definition? Well, then we're back to eating fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. So what's the point? So the point is to teach people this. They could use this criteria to go and determine anything in the store for themselves. So it's more about awareness, and I think it's more of a grassroots movement than trying to get a certified raw sticker, because as we know with even the organic certification, you could meet the bare minimum standards and be labeled organic, or you could far exceed that and still be labeled organic, and there's no differentiation. There's big agribusinesses that barely meet the standard, and from what I hear sometimes don't meet the standard, but they pay a lot of money to get certified, and they got the sticker. But I know local farmers that don't want to pay the $5,000 or whatever it costs, and they use rock dust, use a lot of compost, and they far exceed the standard, and they're not organic. So I think it's a situation like that with raw, unfortunately, and it really has to come from within the raw foods movement to people like me to teach things like this, so that people just inherently know this, so we don't want to have a label on things. And we all start to grow food, hopefully in our front or backyards, to have that, because that is the best way. If we look at all the animals in nature, no animals in nature go to a store to buy their food. They all eat it out of nature, whether they're a carnivore and they kill other animals to eat them fresh, or they're herbivores, or a combination of both. They all get it fresh, and that's how we should be eating too. But we've been, by the industrialization and consumerism and all these things, we've been taught and bred for many years to go to the store to buy our produce, when that's really not natural, in my opinion. Yes.
I took a blue-green algae supplement that's frozen.
Sure, yeah, E3 Live.
Yeah,
Right.
would you consider that raw?
Well, yeah, I would say that same thing, similar to the chlorella, and actually that would have probably a little bit of advantage, because it does have high water content. So that would probably be 2 yeses and 1 no. And would I take that? Yes. Actually, I really don't like the frozen one personally. I think it's good. I prefer the dry one to frozen, but I personally would take that. Yes.
Do you prefer the powder or the capsules?
The powder, absolutely. I don't like to take any capsules, because the capsules don't meet the criteria. because they're highly processed. Yeah. So I usually empty things out of capsules and then take whatever it is. Yes.
What do you think about probiotics?
Absolutely. So sure, probiotics. So the question is, what do I think about probiotics? I think probiotics are very beneficial. And I think that we should be eating a lot more probiotics than that we could get from just like a sauerkraut, or some places just teach, just eat sauerkraut and you'll get all your probiotics. But that might have some lactobacillus, but there's so many different varieties that we don't even know all of them. I mean, there's soil-based and other ones that colonize and ones that just kind of pass through and do their thing while they're in us and then leave us. So I regularly eat probiotics and switch brands too, because each brand, has different, patented strains. And so I don't know which one's good. I mean, I have a couple things. I have a couple that I'd recommend. Actually, the best one I'd recommend is actually Dr. Ohhira's Probiotic 10 Plus. Yeah, those are actually shelf stable. So I take Ohhira, Ohiraras. Yeah. Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics 10 Plus. Yeah, and they're one of the better ones in my opinion. If I go traveling out in a foreign country and I get like a stomach ache, usually from some kind of bad bacteria, I'll take a couple of those and then it'll just go away. So I know they're very effective and they're shelf stable. And actually, they're not really even a probiotic, because the company in Japan that makes them, they basically get all these foods from the mountains and then come back and they have these big vats and they just basically ferment all these foods with this probiotic strain, and it's just a big fermentation. And I talked to the owners of the company that imported. They're called Essential Formulas out of Texas, and I want to go to the factory tour in Japan one day. That'd be really cool. They said they have all these little like wooden buckets full that they play music to, full of this mixture of this stuff fermenting, and they have like the different ages, like 5 months, 6 months, all the way down, and they would taste some out of the different ones, and it tastes like peanut butter. So I mean, you could take the capsule, break it open in your mouth, and it's just like tastes like some peanut butter. So it's not really even a probiotic, because it's not just like white crystalline powder. It's like a real food. But in order to import it as a food, it'd be a lot more red tape than to just import it as a probiotic. So they import it as a probiotic, even though it is really a whole food. Sure. Any other questions? Yes.
What's your opinion on those oxygenating supplements like sulfur?
Sure. So my opinion on the oxygenating supplements, such as cell food. I'm not a big fan of those. I mean, I think I went to a trade show once and they were selling that, and like I was actually in Las Vegas for this. It's a trade show for the industry, for the health food industry, and they were selling those. And so like I went up to the booth, and how they were testing that the product worked was they give you basically a oximeter test. So they basically test your oxygen level in your blood. And so they tested mine. It was like, I don't know, I forget whatever it was. It was like 98. And they said, okay, so now we have the baseline. Now take this supplement and come back in 10 minutes after it's oxygenated your blood more, and then take it again. And so I took it, came back and took it again, and it was like the same. But I guess people all day were doing that and taking it, and then they'd have an increase. And I could see why, because when you're not eating, oxygen-rich foods, well, guess what? Water, tied to oxygen, right? Water-rich foods. If you're not eating water-rich foods, you're not going to be as oxygenated, and also, other things in lifestyle, such as getting exercise and making sure your body's working correctly, is going to increase that. So, I mean, those things also may do some things with detoxifying your colon, which I haven't really looked into. But overall, I'd say, I'd probably rather breathe straight oxygen, like go into a hyperbaric chamber or, an oxygen machine, oxygen bar for the oxygen, if it's not to do like that oxygen cleansing aspect of it. I think we should just eat right, and many of the supplements I think are not needed. Yes.
No, oh wait, what was that? They only worried about, I said, because I'm a vegan, I have really low cholesterol. I said, so I mean, they said worrying about things that worrying about low cholesterol, which of course is common in vegans. So of course, but what does that have any? Do you have things on that? Or?
Sure. So the questions regarding low cholesterol in vegans. I'm not a medical doctor.
Nothing good science like, they're so worried about now
Sure.
people who have abnormally low blood. I guess.
Well, no problem. Well, so the thing is, I'm not a doctor, and I don't profess to be one, and I don't have all the answers, but this is my opinion on the cholesterol thing. On the cholesterol thing, our only animals with a liver have cholesterol. So if we eat products with cholesterol, then our cholesterol will raise. The other thing is if we have all the building blocks for us to make cholesterol, we will make cholesterol on our own and have the proper amount. A lot of the blood tests that they do in the medical profession, and I'm a layman, I'm not a doctor, and in my opinion, all the basically the values they have for the normal values are from the average population. So here's an example. So if you, and I went to the chiropractor before, or a doctor, and they would take my temperature, and my temperature is like, what's a regular temperature? 98.5. I'm always at like 96.5. And the doctor would always tell me, hey, you need to eat more eggs, John, this raw food thing's not working, your temperature's not hot enough. But the whole thing is, after, there's studies where Seventh-day Adventists also have low body temperature, and after conferring with other raw foodists, and this was many years ago I found this out, that many raw foodists are also 96.5. Maybe everybody in the world is running a constant 2-degree fever to burn off all the toxins or something. So anyways, blood tests, some blood tests, not all of them, but some blood tests and regular tests where they show the, reference range may be based on the average population, in which case some of those may be. And if you did want to raise your cholesterol for some strange reason, eat more coconuts, because I have found, and through other friends, if you eat more coconuts, that will raise your cholesterol.
We also have to look at the ratios.
And the ratios, right, of course. All right, yes. So the question relating when I did the Arise and Shine colon cleanse, was that an important part of my process? I'd say absolutely yes, because if I didn't do the cleanse, my skin wouldn't have cleared up, and then I wouldn't have had the true belief that I really needed to do raw, because I would have just read about this crazy wacko guy saying to eat raw, and I wouldn't have saw the difference in my skin that the doctors couldn't change. So yes, and I did feel some things come up, and I think definitely digestion is really important, because we are not what we eat. Like, you are what you eat is a common saying. We are what we assimilate. And if your digestion's all clumped up and there's mucoid plaque, if you believe in that or not, and I still go back and forth that that's a real thing. Some things coating in our stomachs that prevent us from absorbing things, and I don't know if that's real or not. But, I definitely agree that we should do some form of colon cleansing. I have done some limited colonics in the past. I'm not like some raw food speakers who say, you need to do a colonic every week. I think that could actually be very harmful. Yeah, it can get very expensive. I think, you need to do the adequate amount of cleansing so that you feel you've got good digestion. Whatever that may be, and I'm not going to really talk too much more, because that's I think it's a whole individual thing. I think supplements could be good, and, there's all kinds of different therapies to use to get there. Yes.
I've noticed at Whole Foods they have raw vitamin E.
Sure.
Is that really raw?
Sure. So the question is,
raw.
At Whole Foods, she's noticed they have raw vitamin E. So now the supplement industry wants to capitalize on the whole raw foods thing. So one company in particular, and there's probably a few others, but one company, Garden of Life, who was founded by Jordan Rubin, who was basically healed himself with raw foods and supplementation, founded that company. And let's see. So is raw? For me on supplements, the thing is, instead of a supplement, thinking in the standard American model is, you have a problem, take this supplement. If you have a headache, take an aspirin to get rid of your headache. But we could step back and say, well, what was the headache caused by? And one of the only things we do, with this same kind of mentality is, if our car check engine light comes on, we don't just pull out the bulb so it doesn't light up anymore. We take it to a mechanic, or they put in an OBD2 reader and read the computer codes to say, oh, your engine light is on because your oxygen sensor in your exhaust is not working, so fix that. And we fix the problem so the engine light goes out. We don't just take out the light or put some tape over it, right? So we want to do the same. We want to do the same thing in our lives. We want to try to, not just we need vitamin E, let's take a vitamin E supplement. Let's go back a little bit further. Well, why don't we eat some foods that contain vitamin E? And, there's a lot of foods that contain vitamin E, so get on Google and do a Google search, foods with vitamin E. A lot of them may not make this list, so include the ones that, that will meet your criteria, whatever they may be. So I try to get most of my nutrients from food. I think if I was going to take a vitamin E, which I don't feel that we have a specific need to take vitamin E, because I think we could easily meet that from our foods, I would probably take the raw one before I took a non-raw one. And also I'd look at the process that, they made it. Some of one of the supplements that I really agree that everybody on a raw food diet should be taking is vitamin B12. I've gotten my blood tested, and several of my friends that have been raw for many years have gotten tested. And if you're totally against supplements, you could get your blood tested and find out if you really need it. And you want to not just get the vitamin B12 test, that's the levels of B12 in your blood. You want to get the functional indicators of the vitamin B12, which is methylmalonic acid and homocysteine. So we want to see if even if you have a high B12, doesn't mean it's working properly in your body. So yes.
Out of curiosity, when you had your blood tested, were you low?
So before I started taking supplementation, my B12 was like low, just out of range, out of the standard reference range, but my functional indicators were not in range at all.
I was wondering if you had your own garden, because they say the B12 you get it from the
Right,
natural.
but I hadn't been doing I had been growing food for about 10 years, but in the ancillary, not as like a main part of my life until probably about 3 years ago when I started getting community garden plots, and then about a year ago actually converted my front yard. I've been growing all in the periphery of my front yard and all in my backyard, but I really ramped it up within this last year. But that being said, I do have a friend who has been growing for many years on the raw foods diet, who has been eating out of his garden for the most part of his diet, and he was low in B12 also. But that being said, when I did do some experimentation on trying to find foods, because they say many foods have B12, because that would be my first thing I'd like to do is eat foods with B12. They say yeast and dulse and all these other things. But what I've learned is that they may have B12 analogs, which look like B12 under the microscope, but in our bodies they're not actually B12. So they say spirulina may have B12 and chlorella, and actually I think I determined chlorella might actually have some active B12 in it, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. And so for me it's more about what's going to be healthier for me, and not having to live up to this raw food dogma. Oh, I have to eat raw, I have to eat all plants, I can't do any supplements. That's not natural. My mentality is 100% health, not 100% raw. And if I had to learn that I need to eat an animal product, if I expired all my other options, I would. I don't have a problem with it, but I would, that have to be the last choice, of course. I'd take a supplement before I had to eat some flesh or something. But, it's all about, like I mentioned in a lot of my talks, good, better, best. We want to try to do the best we can. If you can just do the good, hey, that's good. If you can do better, hey, that's great. We want to try to do the best we can. So food source supplements, then move along to if you got to take a supplement, to be healthier, to achieve whatever you need. I think we should do that. So B12 is definitely one I believe that everybody should be taking. It's relatively inexpensive, and you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches if you are deficient in the future. Just good insurance. And then the other one that I've learned in the recent years that may be more important nowadays is vitamin D. So I have a friend that lives in the tropics who's all raw, and he's out surfing and with his shirt off all the time in the tropics, and his vitamin D is great. And so if you live in the tropics and you're out surfing and you're in the sun every day, you're probably going to be fine. But, we live here in California, and I even have a friend, that friend lives in Puerto Rico. I have another friend who lives in Florida, and his vitamin D was low, and he lives in South Florida, where, and I don't know how much he's outside surfing or doing all that stuff, but his vitamin D was low nonetheless. And we're here in California, and unless you're out in the sun a lot and getting good sun exposure, and then nowadays with people being paranoid about the sun and putting sunblock on, that doesn't help you to make vitamin D. So you might want to get your vitamin D levels checked. I get my blood tested through Life Extension magazine. They have an annual blood sale. I think it's on about now, actually. So every year I spend about $300-400 to get a lot of things checked to make sure I'm still healthy, because just like we want to know what's going on. We can't just have this blind faith. Oh yeah, I'm eating all raw, I'm healthy. No, how do we know this works? We're some of the first generations to do this, in a long time, and what's in our food today is not the same that was in our food 1,000 years ago because the topsoil's eroded. We don't have the minerals in our food that we used to have. So I like to constantly check myself and see, and if there's something that I'm deficient in, first I'm going to try to get it from a food source, and if I can't, then a supplement, and then, I'll go wherever I have to get in line to be as healthy as possible, because the goal should be 100% health, not 100% raw. Yes?
I always get confused with vitamin D supplements because there's vitamin D3, vitamin D this, and vitamin D that.
Yeah, so there's basically two different kinds. There's like a vitamin D2 and a vitamin D3. So the D3 is usually like the vegetarian source, and the D2 is not the vegetarian source. And there's been conflicting studies, and once again, got to give a disclaimer.
Because I said D2 is not a...
D2 is not the vegetarian source
What
for
was
the
the
most part. It's a
vegetarian
D3.
D3.
And there's been conflicting studies on shows and which one has a better absorption rates. So, you know, I pretty much try to do mostly all the D3, but I take some D2 sometimes just for insurance. And then I've been getting a lot of sunlight. I came back from Florida, and I guess, you know, it kind of comes all together, you know. So, like, I did a video show on my Growing Your Greens channel, and that web channel basically goes out to just gardeners, not necessarily even people into raw foods or into health, but I like to interject my information to them because I have a really big following. I have over 3,000 people following me on that channel, so it's really great. I can have a pretty large impact on a lot of people that aren't even into raw foods. So I had an episode about calcium one day, and then I had to go to a Starbucks to get an empty milk jug, and I tried to fill that up with some rock dust and water and make it look like milk, but that didn't quite work. Actually, I used baking soda, and rock dust would have made it too gray. That didn't quite work. But anyways, I held up the jug, you know, next to my arugula and said, you know, arugula has 6 times more calcium than milk. And, you know, held it up next to my collard greens, and collard greens has 3 times more calcium than milk. And just letting people know that there are alternative ways to get your calcium instead of from the milk, like from the plants. But the other thing is, you know, in order to build bones, we need a few things. We don't just need calcium. Guess what else we need? We need vitamin D. Where do we get vitamin D? Well, if we're out in our garden gardening, right, we're getting vitamin D from the sun, we're eating the calcium from the plants, and then we're working, getting physical activity, which puts a demand on our bones, so we will grow bones. So, like, all this stuff is connected, and, you know, nature, or whomever you want to say, higher powers, you know, put it out there so that we would exist naturally in a natural world, but we've gotten so far away from that natural world. So yeah, the answer would be, you know, I do take a D3 primarily, but occasionally I'll take a D2 just to be safe. And my supplement compliance is really poor.
So where's D2 from? It's not that term.
I think, don't quote me, it's like lanolin or sheep's wool or I don't know, all kinds of different things.
I can't have
A food source of vitamin D, and I tried to start growing some, is like shiitake mushrooms. But it needs to be sun-dried shiitake mushrooms or sun-grown, because, you know, make this shiitake like us would make the D from the sun. So it needs to be like that for what it's worth. All right, so any other questions really quick? All right.
If there was someone who was highly influential in society, like say Oprah, and they embraced the raw foods lifestyle, do you think that would be a benefit to society, or that would be a detriment?
I think it'd be benefit, but the thing is, the caveat is how it's introduced. You know, you can't just say raw food. You can say, I don't know, eat 80% of your diet like that is rich in water content, because that just makes it really easy. Like fresh fruits, or just eat 80% of your diet is fresh fruits and vegetables. I mean, that's what really needs to happen. Somebody very influential to tell people to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, and make a statement and do it themselves, and use all their money and power to write books to educate people, not about raw, but, you know, I don't like to confine myself to raw, because, I mean, it's raw, you're different, and it's weird, but everybody would agree with eating more fresh fruits and vegetables, and just eat, you know, really high percentage, and I think that would be good. Oh, I agree, it would be good. But it depends on how you did it. Yeah, no, Dr. Oz has said that. He's even said actually raw.
I think he doesn't want to actually come out and, you know, be a proponent of it, because I think...
Well, he's got to ride that fence, because he's on TV and you can't piss too many people off.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. All right, great. So I guess I'll just move into my next part, which was talking about, you know, how I was growing my own food, since there's some people here want to hear about that. So basically, I got into growing my own foods, as I said before, because I want to have a higher quality food. You know, even shopping at the farmer's market and shopping daily, because as somebody into raw foods, you should shop daily or several times a week. You can no longer just go to the grocery store and one day a week, although I have friends that are raw that do this, and it's terrible. They'll like go to the farmer's market and load up for the whole week, or go to the supermarket and load up for the whole week, and, you know, fill up their fridge and then just eat that the whole week. That's not optimal, because, you know, that food you got on that day is already like a week old if it's from the farmer's market, but if you're buying it from the the health food store or the grocery store, that stuff's already 7 days by the time you're buying it. Well, you're lucky to be here in Sacramento. It's probably at least a couple less days. And on Florida, it could be up to 7 to 10 days. Maybe here, I don't know, 3 to 4 days. But it depends on the distribution system and all that stuff. But nonetheless, we want to be eating the highest quality food as possible. And I really learned, so another raw food teacher at the Portland event that I went to, he had a book on what's called biophotons. And I mean, this is all these things that I've learned. I think everything happens for a reason. I learned about that, Cleanse and Purify Thyself book about 6 months after I had been juicing. And in the book it said, you should only go on this cleanse if you've already alkalinized your body. And you need to alkalinize by juicing for 6 months. And I'm like, whoa, I haven't juicing for 6 months. And I just seem to learn these things. And some things I inherently kind of know, but then I get reiterated by meeting somebody or hearing a lecture or something. So actually there's two people I heard, a produce distributor that lived on the East Coast, who told me the story of the broccoli and how he buys broccoli from here, California, and then gets shipped out there, sitting in his warehouse, and how old it actually is by the time he sells it to the stores he sells it to, and then it sits in their back room before they put it out. And I'm like, oh my God! And he talks about the nutrient loss and some nutrition's lost, 50% gone within a day on some nutrients. So I mean, if all the food we're eating is we're thinking we're doing the best, we're eating whole foods, organic stuff, but 50% of the nutrition is lost on some nutrients. There's still nutrition in there. And once again, I don't want to get you down on eating stuff from the co-op or Whole Foods or anything. But just put that out there, good, better, best, and definitely fresh produce from Whole Foods is way better than canned produce from Whole Foods. But better yet would be going to the farmer's market, 2 times a week or 3 times a week, hitting the different ones and buying your stuff, for the next day or two. Or better yet would be to grow your own food. So I haven't figured out anything better than that yet, but I might one day. Oh no, wait, wild weeds. No, that isn't even better, I figured, because I could harvest the wild weed seeds, and I did that in Germany. I harvested steamed nettle seeds, brought it back to California, and now I grow them in compost and rock dust. So I provide those weeds the highest quality nutrition so that they could be the best they could be, and then I could eat them and get the highest nutrition out of that. So I don't know. One day maybe I'll figure out better soil supplementation, and I've been doing soil tests too to make sure that my soil is as good as it can be, so that my plants can be as nutrient dense as they can be, so then I can be as nutrient dense as I can be. And most farmers, unfortunately, we are rewarding bad behavior in the produce industry, and we do this by buying by the pound. So because we sell by the pound, produce by the pound, all the farmers want to maximize their yield, their tonnage, because they get more money the more pounds they make. And some farmers do care, mostly people at the farmers market, maybe, but not all the time, care about the quality of the food and when it's picked and if it's ripe and all that stuff. So that's why definitely farmers market is better than Whole Foods, but doing it yourself, even better yet. One of the tests I did one time was I took what's called a Brix meter. So this is a Brix meter. It's a refractometer. You could put a drip of juice from a fruit, or if you have a vegetable like a leaf, you could just juice the vegetable and get a drip of juice from the vegetable, like kale or whatever. And then you look through it like a telescope, like an eyeglass, like the pirates used to look at it as spyglass. You kind of look into the light, and then there's a gradient, so it goes from 0 to 30 or something. And if you put the juice on there, the light will reflect through the juice, and then it'll show you a demarcation. Anywhere from 0 to 30 or wherever. And let's see, say it's at 18, and there's a standardized chart. So there's a chart that says, if your raspberries are 4, that's very poor. If it's 6, it's good. If it's 12, it's excellent, or whatever. I think one year I tested my raspberries that are one number higher than the excellent ones on the chart. But I took this to the farmer's market one day just to see what would happen. And the farmers that really knew what I was doing, they were kind of pissed. They were kind of almost insulted that I would do this to their fruit. Because I went around to every peach farmer at the farmer's market that day and checked their stuff. And even the one that I want to support that does, compost and says he does rock dust, his Brix was actually lower than a farmer that doesn't spray anything and so-called organic. But, I don't know. And since that time, I've had my doubts. But his peaches actually were a higher Brix. But it's not just the number. It's also that at the demarcation point, it could be all, basically it's like a bluish purple. It's a bluish purple, all bluish purple up to a point, then it's all white. But you don't want the demarcation line to be solid. You want it to be really fuzzy, because the fuzziness actually talks about some of the nutrients, or basically it's a total dissolved solid, something like that. So if there's more minerals, the more fuzzier it is. So I'm looking for the number and the fuzziness. So yeah, so if everybody, had a refractometer at the farmer's market, and then nobody would buy from the person that had the, lowest bricks and the least minerals in it, we reward the person that had the best stuff, but we're not set up like that, unfortunately. So to do that, you have to pretty much do it yourself, I found out. And that's why I pretty much, got into growing my own food, to make a long story short.
Where do you get that refractometer?
Probably the cheapest place is on eBay. It's it's basically called most people use it for wine growers. They grow it because when they harvest their grapes, they want a high bricks content, because that's basically, bricks relates somewhat to sugar content. So it means a higher sugar content, which means a better alcohol fermentation. But yeah, it'd be a fruit bricks refractometer.
How much time do you put into the gardening a week to get it going? And
So I have 2 part-time gardeners that work for me. So it varies depending on the week. They might work extra days. Like right now, we have them like a lot of hours, and they're probably 30 hours a week. But it depends. Once again, I'm voting with my dollars. I could be voting at Whole Foods, or I could vote to employ some, people that have just graduated out of college, support them, because they're definitely good people, and they're helping support me. So does my food cost more than, shopping at the farmer's market? Absolutely. Yeah, I pay a lot of money for my food because I spend money on labor, which is probably the biggest equation. If I was to do it all myself, it would be cheaper, but I don't have the time to do that. I mean, I have a business to run, I travel, and I want to do other things in life. So it's worthwhile for me to vote my dollars, to let them have a good living. One person's a musician who, that's what he wants to do, and he has a band that he does, he works he was working 3 days on and then 4 off. And he just focused on his stuff, on his life, but I support him so that he could do that. And he support me by building my raised beds and getting all that stuff done. So I spend personally some time in my garden, absolutely, making decisions on what I'm planting, purchasing all the supplies, and, I do plant some stuff sometimes too, and I have episodes showing that. But most of the time, it's all done by my help. And I would encourage everybody, if you have a high-paying job and you're making good money, and eating good food is important, hire somebody part-time to do it if you don't have the time to do it because you're doing something more important that's going to net you more dollars than $10 an hour or whatever, I definitely agree that's a good thing to do. But it's hard to find good help. So watch that. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, well, if someone's renting and, they're not sure how long they're going to live in a place, is there something easy?
Sure, yeah, so growing your food, I decided, I own my house, I decided to convert my front lawn, and, I had friends that said, advised me against that. They said, John, you're really limiting yourself when you go to sell your property, because, not everybody's going to want a house with a full-on garden. I said, well, what about all the people that do? They're going to pay more for this place. And, plus it's about me, and I don't want, so his value might be more on, resale value or home than health or than whatever. And my value is like, man, I'm doing whatever I want. This is my house, and I want to grow my own food, damn it. So I did. So that being said, if you don't have the space, everybody could grow, even in the Midwest or wherever it snows or Ottawa, Canada, you could grow your own sprouts in your kitchen. Absolutely easiest thing to do, and that is growing your own food. Yeah, you don't think of sprouts as like a real food, but you can grow buckwheat sprouts, sunflower greens, wheatgrass, you can grow clover sprouts, all kinds of different, all the little small sprouts, no problem. I definitely encourage you to grow some of the definitely leafy green sprouts like the buckwheat and the, sunflower greens, because those are, that's a little bit different. They have a lot more higher chlorophyll content. I think we should be eating things high in chlorophyll. Some other ways you could garden inside, they have like these little toys, and I call them toys. They're like arrow gardens, and they're pretty much toys. They're kind of a novelty. They're not for serious raw food production, and that's what I do in my front yard. I try to do production growing, not just, the ancillary like I did in prior years. But another way you could do it that's really good is container gardening. So I have a couple episodes on growing in containers. Actually, I try to maximize the use of all my space in my on my property, and one of the spaces that I was not utilizing effectively was in my driveway. So my driveway's a little bit long, so I could park a car, and then I still have extra space. So I put like 10 wine barrels in there. So wine barrels are pretty good investment. They're relatively inexpensive. I got them for about, well, mine, I think, depending on I got them for a half barrel from $10 to $20.
Okay.
And they're, you could pick them up and move them when you're moving, and you can take them with you.
To pick up and move when they're full.
Well, you'll have to probably empty them out.
Okay.
But there's other things. They have galvanized, and I'm going to do an episode on this really soon. They have galvanized, like, you can plant in galvanized garbage cans, plastic totes. I mean, I would prefer to use more natural things like wood or galvanized, I don't know what it's called. It's like a galvanized big bucket. And so they're like the same diameter as a half barrel, but they're shorter, and most plants don't need more than 12 inches. So I'm going to...
It's metal.
Yeah, it's metal.
So that's probably not as good as the wood barrels.
Well, I'd say in some aspects it's better, because it's not going to rot, it's metal, it's galvanized, and is that the best? No, but it's a hell of a lot lighter to move and has 2 carry handles.
Right.
So actually within the next few weeks I'll be doing an episode on taking this and planting it out and showing you the whole process.
So could you plant actual heads of lettuce?
Absolutely.
In like the coffee, or not coffee, but the wine barrels too?
Absolutely. No, I did actually. Over the winter, I wouldn't do it in the summertime,
Right.
especially here in Sacramento. But
Yeah.
you could plant like, each plant has different spacing, so each plant needs a little bit different spacing between its neighbors to have enough root growth to grow optimally to produce a good quantity of food. So for tomatoes, I could fit about 3 tomato plants in 1 wine barrel, or I could plant about 6 pepper plants in 1 wine barrel. The spacing on the lettuce, we're planting lettuce out now, we give it about 8 inches between each plant. Some of the things that I'd probably grow in the summertime for leafy greens would be something like kale, would be a good one, or collards, and that's about 12-inch spacing. So you can still fit a bunch in a wine barrel or in a container. And you definitely want to get, a full sun, or, good sun, for sure. I mean, things will grow in shade, they just won't grow as fast.
Okay. Yeah, I would love a class on that.
Yeah, but so, everybody out hand these around now, actually. You should take one of my handouts. This is how to contact me and some of my other websites. I have the website rawfoods.com, which I started that website back in 1997, and one of the good things about that website is that it actually hasn't changed too much since then. So the information that I had back then is what's on it now, and I haven't updated with all this agave and all these other things that are literally brand new foods. I mean, there was no such thing as agave nectar invented in the world when I got into raw foods. So what makes it, we could just all of a sudden make this new food and start consuming it without any repercussions. So I have that. And then my other website, discountjuicers.com. So I sell, for a living, I sell appliances that allow people to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, such as juicers, blenders, dehydrators. And also I do an expo, the rawhealthexpo.com. I'm going to have the second annual one, hopefully, this July 24th and 25th. That may or may not happen at this point. I have another website, growingyourgreens.com. Is my gardening channel. I have over 200 videos on the process I took to convert my front lawn to gardening, and all other kind of episodes where I do field trips out to nurseries and places to buy starts and everything related to gardening.
The state has something called pathwaysofreedom.com.
That's great.
I said our most are close. So I learned it. We have this thing called the Davis Holworth Fest with the county next to us. In fact, there is one, Pathways of Freedom. The Davis, they will actually, if you own a suburban lot, they can actually. I saw them on TV. They can actually they can consult you. I mean, how to make a working farm on your suburban property.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's what my videos do for free at no charge. And then I have another website, youngcoconuts.com. The one website that's not on here isokraw.com. So primarily nowadays I'm doing my education through YouTube videos. I find it's the easiest. I'm not a writer, so I've never really been big on writing, but I'm a good talker. And I do a lot of videos. So one of my channels is dedicated to teaching people about all the different raw foods appliances, because people get confused when they go to buy their first juicer or second juicer or whatever appliance, or different blenders. So I do comparison tests between the Vitamix and the Blendtec and all the different equipment coming out, and how to use the different spiral slicers to make noodles out of zucchini. And so that's one YouTube channel. I have another channel on the gardening, and then the other one,okraw.com, is my specific channel for teaching people about raw foods. I try to keep them all separate, because if I get a gardener who's into gardening and then he learns about my vegan and raw foods, oh, that guy's wacko, then they don't subscribe to me. But I want to try to include everybody and not exclude everybody. So if you want raw, you can see this. If you want garden, you can see that. And if you want equipment, you can do the other one. So I'll hand these around. I guess it's a good time to too. And so here are the brochures for my business. If you want to take a brochure, most of my catalog is all online, and I really don't like to waste paper, but I have those for people that like to hold something. And then I have, let's see, this handout here is my handout on my research on agave and cacao. It's my agave and cacao information sheet to tell you a little bit about the research that I've learned and done on those guys.
Is that on your website?
That might be on my website under the articles on the rawfoods.com website as a PDF that you could print out yourself, right? And then the other thing, it took me many years, and I said I'm not a writer, but actually after, 12 years of being raw, I finally came out with a booklet. And so I've been behind the scenes all this time and really living this lifestyle. And I'm not a writer. I mean, there's many raw food writers or people that get into raw food 6 months ago and they already have a book, or 2 years ago and they have a book. And they're instant a celebrity, and now they know it all because they've done it for 2 years and they have a book. And I'm a booklet, and I've been doing it for 15 years. So anyways, this is 15 years of information in this little booklet. Mostly contains simple recipes that'll be mostly yeses, according to our list. Basically, high water content foods that we should be eating, because there's not a whole lot of other raw food recipe books that have this kind of information, as long as, some other things I thought that was important to put in there. So I have these available. They're $5 if you'd like to buy one afterwards. You come and see me. I have a limited supply up here. So got that out of the way. So getting back to growing your foods. Does anybody have any questions about any other questions? Yes.
What do you use for bug control?
So for what control?
Bug control?
So bug control. So sure. That's always a big question. What do you do about bugs and insects and things? So I guess my overall thing is, I try to look at nature for answers. Just like I look at nature, what other animal on earth eats cooked food, right? What other animal on earth wears shoes? And I usually am wearing my Vibram 5 fingers, which are my barefoot shoes, because I really like those a lot. Except when it's really cold and rainy, which it was yesterday and today in Santa Rosa, so I don't wear them. But how would nature deal with bugs and other insects from eating themselves? Well, all plants, to some extent, have some naturally occurring pesticides in them. And I'll have a show on this actually pretty soon on my Growing Your Greens channel. Just like, spinach has oxalic acid. Oxalic acid may be in there so that certain bugs that, are native to the area where spinach grows would not eat them because they would get sick. Or animals that eat spinach would get sick if they ate too much of that because it wouldn't be able to digest it. So that way it would ensure this plant would continue to grow. So, but when you unnaturalize these plants and then grow them in areas where there's different bugs, that whole system doesn't really work too much. So one of the things I try to do is plant a variety. So I do testing. So I'll plant, I have like 20 different varieties of peppers this year. And I'm going to see which peppers do better. And some peppers, by the strain, are more bug and disease resistant. Like, people that have a darker skin are more resistant to the sun than, if you're pale, right? You'll get burnt easier. So all plants are a little bit different. So, I use natural selection and selecting my plants and seeing which one's going to do better. My trials. The other thing I do is I plant a lot, more than I would need, because I figure I'm going to plant a lot, and, if the bugs get some, they get some, but then I'm left with some too. The other thing I do is I'll do some natural controls if I need to. So I prefer to do traps first. Insect traps that will just trap the insects, and if you have a bunch of traps, that'll trap them, and then that'll get rid of them. Whether it's a sticky trap or a trap that the flies fly into and then they can't get out of there and they expire, or a beer trap for slugs, that they'll go in the beer, drink the beer, and drown or get drunk first or whatever. I'll do manual control, so I'll have a video where I actually go out, and I know this isn't totally vegan of me, with a barbecue steak and go out and spear my slugs that are my greens, and that's not the best thing to do. The vegan friends, they don't like it, but for me, it's about either I'm eating or they're eating, and they can go to my neighbors and eat all their stuff. But if they're going to be on, and I will put up a warning sign. It's only fair. My dad had a warning sign for the Argentinian ants in his house. It said, "Warning, Argentinian ants. You can go outside, eat all the food, but if you're in my kitchen, you're going to feel the wrath or something." I'm going to put a sign up soon. I keep forgetting, and I mention it in talks like this. But I do want to give a fair warning. But if they are eating my food, then, I need to do what I need to do so that I will eat. Because, not that I'm more important than a slug, but I know I have to have some value in somewhere. Because otherwise they would eat everything, actually. And the other control is I do some organic control. So they do have, like, diatomaceous earth, which is basically ground up shells, which something like, some animals don't like because it dehydrates them. They have, you can spray like pepper sprays or other kind of, OMRI, which is basically Organic Materials Review Institute, certified products, and they sell these at your local, nursery, OMRI certified products, which basically will meet the organic standards. So if you're buying organic produce at the store, chances are they're using some kind of OMRI certified natural pesticides. So they're natural pesticides that are allowable in organic production, and those are the ones that I primarily use. So for slugs, they have this product called Sluggo, and then basically it's some kind of iron phosphate or something that the slugs eat, and then they expire, and it's natural. It breaks down into a fertilizer for your plants, actually, the end result. You could also, another really easy one we do a lot is spraying a solution of Dr. Bronner soap, because the bugs don't like to eat the saponins in the soap. So, there's another one could be taking your tomato leaves, blending it up with some water, letting it ferment, and then just spray that, because in tomatoes it has a naturally occurring chemical that aphids don't like. So there's just many different ways to do it, and for me it's just like, and sometimes I'll consult the master gardeners in my area, and they're a great resource, and they're in most areas to consult them, and they may have non-organic controls. You could also ask them about organic controls. You're here near UC Davis, and I'm sure UC Davis has a fabulous program where they have many valuable resources for you to access on what grows good and when, and things like natural controls. I released predatory insects, so I'm going to have an episode on this pretty soon. I released the ladybugs that eat aphids and other small animals. I'm going to release some praying mantis, and I had praying mantis last year in my garden that are really cool. And actually, I saw it go out, and it just laid the egg sac or whatever. That was really crazy when you see them in the garden. They're on the melon trellis. So predatory insects, they have predatory nematodes, which are like bugs you can't see, and I kind of wonder if they really work. But there's many different things, so you don't have to be scared of bugs. If you have an outbreak, figure out, the manual controls is the big thing. I get a lot of aphids, and whenever I see aphid infestation, I'll clip those off, and they go in my green bin, which goes off my property, which gets composted by the city. I don't just compost those in my compost, because then I don't want to breed more aphids. But yeah, it's really not that difficult, and I don't know. It's not as hard as it is. And grow a variety of things, and don't have all your eggs in one basket. So if my bok choy crop's bad, I have kale or collards or 5 different varieties of, kales growing next to it that will be good. So I'll always have something to eat. We brought a whole bunch of leaves here. I guess we could. This is one of my tree collards leaves. And this one is one of my favorite plants. This is called a perennial vegetable. So most vegetables are like one-season crops. So you plant the seeds of kale. It'll grow up, make leaves that you harvest, and then it'll go to flower and seed, at which point all the energy for that plant is to go into reproduction, to make new seeds, to drop for the following years, and then they'll drop and then grow new plants. So the time it goes to flower, it's pretty much useless for us as people to try to eat them, because when it's going into seed and flower production, the leaves are really small. And yeah, you can still eat them and stuff, but they're not really good. Whereas this plant, you plant once, and these plants are like trees. They're 12 feet tall, and at the top, you just imagine thousands, I don't know about thousands, maybe hundreds of these leaves at the top, and everybody can just grab a piece of this and pick this morning.
What's that called?
That's called tree collards. And so I encourage everybody to look more into perennial vegetables, and I have several episodes about growing perennials, because those are the easiest ones to take care of, because you literally plant them once, and as long as you keep them healthy, they keep making leaves for you, and you can keep eating them. There's not a whole lot of them we could do in our climate, but if you're like in a tropical climate, there's definitely a lot more. But something else that would be maybe considered perennial would be asparagus. You can plant asparagus once and it'll live for many years. You can keep harvesting asparagus, but the problem with that is that the asparagus shoots only come up like once a year, but then it makes it into this fern, and most people don't know that you can actually eat the asparagus fern. It's very fibrous and not too tasty, but you can eat it. And I've been learning all these things. I never knew what an asparagus fern looked like until I grew asparagus and either got lazy and didn't harvest them, or whatever. And it grew into a fern. And I have all the videos on my website to show what happens. Things that I'm intrigued about. I'm figuring and other people that got to be intrigued about this stuff too. This is what lettuce looks like when it goes to bolts, and then it gets really bitter too. You know, so there would be stages when I just won't even eat the lettuce when it's too bitter, and you know, we were making a whole bunch of kale chips and things to use my greens, and I have episodes on how to use the food you grow. So even for like the regular people that watch my show, I have our episode on making, you know, I don't call it kale chips, I call it dehydrated vegetable chips or dried vegetable chips for them. And I'm just making kale chips. And then most people are like, well, I mean, I think I got one negative response, but most people are like, wow, that's really cool. You know, I could dehydrate my vegetables. I mean, you could make your own green powders. You take some greens you grew, dehydrate them, then powder them up, and then you have your own, you know, kale powder.
No high water content.
But once again, good, better, best. If I'm on an airplane, you know, and I'm traveling, or you know, I'm here in the car all day. I mean, yes, I travel with 2 cantaloupes, and I polished off about I don't know how many baskets of strawberries, 9 baskets of strawberries on the way up. And, you know, I have some fresh stuff there too. But you know, kale chips are fun. I was thinking about that. But yeah, do the best you can. Eat the most fresh foods as possible. But you know, you want to have fun too, and don't feel like you are so constricted and confined. I got to eat all fresh. Well, sometimes you want that crunch, you know, and give yourself a little leeway not to be that strict. Yes, we got to wrap it up. All right. Well, I think we're pretty much finished. Unless you have any other questions. Oh yes, in the back.
How do you interact with your friends and other people eating that kind of food? I mean, you know, that's one thing I'm finding hard is that like I have to pack up my own stuff everywhere.
Right.
Just go to my friend's house for dinner.
Right.
I don't have to, but
Yeah. So the
everything's
question.
so based around food. And,
I know.
you know.
It's very unfortunate. So the question is, how do you handle social situations and people and food and all that stuff? Well, I can only say that I've lost many friends since I've been raw, and I will bring my own food in many instances or just not eat. But I think for most people it shouldn't be that hard because I'm pretty stringent. My goal is 100% raw, and I pretty much achieve that, or 99.999 on a daily basis, like really high percentage raw. But if you're not all raw, it's really not an issue. Eat all raw and high water content, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables when you're on your own. And when you go out with somebody for dinner or something, you know, eat some steamed vegetables or some salads out of the restaurant, or, you know, order specific things off the menu, you know, with a custom order. You know they have avocados because they have a whatever bacon, lettuce, cheeseburger, I mean, whatever has off of BLT. I don't know all the things nowadays. But just say, oh, you got avocados, so put some avocados on the side, or bring avocados with you to the restaurant. I mean, we're at a restaurant tonight, we brought our own greens, and we have our dressing in the car, and but yeah, and it can be challenging, but you know, it just depends on your commitment. You know, I'd rather piss off my friends than compromise my health, but some people would probably rather compromise their health than piss off their friends. So it comes back down to values, and I think values are really important. So, but once again, if you're not all raw, you know, hey, when you got your friends, that's your time to, you know, party it up and eat some healthy, non-raw, whole foods, minimally cooked. You know, of course, steaming and boiling are probably the best ways, and microwaving and frying are the worst. But we all do
you're
that.
really going off the wagon. Have some steamed potatoes.
Yeah, right. Yes, I don't do that, but that's a point. I mean, most people aren't going to be all raw, so that's when you would. And then, but when you do that, make sure you have a good, you know, I'd say at least 50% raw stuff, and then your cooked stuff. So have a salad of 50% raw, and then whatever cooked stuff you're going to have, and eat the raw stuff first. Get that enzymatic activity. I've heard that when you eat a good percentage of raw stuff first, and then cooked stuff, you don't actually get that leukocytosis reaction, which is the increase in the white blood cell count. You know, that.
Oh, so you're saying that, like, say I wanted to stay like 80% raw, say, on
Right.
a daily basis.
Right.
You're saying I should eat the raw food first?
Well, I'm saying when you go out with friends and family.
Okay.
So your meal out with friends and family, when you're going to eat some cooked stuff, eat raw, 50% of your meal raw, and then the rest cooked.
Okay.
Then at least you can still fit in and eat something.
Right.
I mean, for me, I just like most often I just don't eat out at restaurants because I break out in a rash because most of the time it's not organic. I mean, even at a raw food restaurant, if I eat at a raw food restaurant, I'd get stomach upset, loose bowels. I wouldn't feel good because, you know, I eat a pretty, what I would consider, clean diet. I don't use a lot of different additives that I would use at restaurants and
But
different things.
you weren't like that before. This is now since you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this a
you've
long
been
time.
eating well, but now when you do eat.
Right, I'm much more strongly affected.
Because that's what I thought was happening to me. Because I was like, man, I could always eat anything. why, you know, now it just seems like if I eat, you know, something like one meal even that's, you know, a bunch of bad junk. I mean, just regular.
No, your body becomes more sensitive because your body inherently knows what's good and what's not. It's trying to get rid of that junk, and you're feeling the reaction to that.
Yeah.
So just take that as a learning experience and say, oh, I ate this and I felt this.
Yeah, I didn't want to think that was great. I wanted to be able to do it, but.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'll hang out for a little bit.
Yeah.